Hola clase. So today is arguably one of the most important days in your Spanish education because you're going to learn about verb conjugation. So this is a fun little picture that I found for the occasion, and you'll soon find out that it was not the aliens who created Spanish conjugation. It's something you will learn over time if you take any linguistics classes, but basically conjugation is when we change the form of a verb to match the structure of our grammar based on our subject. So you may be wondering why we're going to learn about conjugation today, and as you can see here, these are the standards for the state of Indiana for first year Spanish class, and as you can see in 1.7.2, that you need to be able to use appropriate grammar structures, and conjugation is one of the best places to start in learning Spanish. And it's very important for the further growth of your ability to speak Spanish is you need to be able to conjugate. So the easiest way to start thinking about Spanish grammar here and conjugation is we're going to flash back to learning English grammar. So in first, second grade, when you're learning about sentences, you learned that a sentence is made of a subject and a verb with a predicate. So your subject is who your sentence is about, your verb is the action word, and your predicate is the rest of your sentence. So in English, for example, as we all know how to say, we could say, I eat the apple. But if we want to say, he eats the apple, as you'll notice, we change eat to eats, and that's conjugation. And you do it all the time in English, but you never really think about it. So for example, in Spanish, you can see the same two sentences, yo como la manzana is I eat the apple, and él come la manzana is he eats the apple. So as you can see, our verb depends on our subject. You can see that in the English one too, you wouldn't say I eat the apple or he eat the apple. The verb always depends on what the subject is, and we're going to look at some charts in Spanish next to see the rules behind which ending we use on our verbs based on our subject. So here it is, your very first verb chart. And I realize it doesn't make sense now. Don't worry, don't panic. We're going to talk about it. So we mentioned before a little bit that verbs are organized by their ending. We have AR verbs, ER verbs, and IR verbs. And that's just based on the last two letters in the verb. So this chart applies to AR verbs. So an example of that might be hablar, to speak. And as you can see, on the left in the black lettering is the different subjects we might use: yo, to, la usted, nosotros, vosotros, and ellos, ellas, ustedes. And so if we're using the sentence with the subject yo, our ending for the verb would just be o. So we would say yo hablo. If we're using to, it would be tú hablas. If we're using anything in the third person, la usted habla. If we're using nosotros, we would say hablamos. Vosotros we don't use very much, but you would say habléis. And if you're using third person plural, ellos, ellas, ustedes, you would say hablan. So here we are moving right along with our ER verb chart. This one works the same as the AR verbs. You'll notice some of the endings are different. So if we're using an ER verb, the example I used earlier was comer. So if we're saying yo como, you could say tú comes. If you're using la usted, you would say come. Nosotros comemos. Vosotros coméis. And ellos, ellos, ustedes would be comen. And last but not least, here's our chart for IR verbs. An example IR verb that I'm going to use is vivir. So we would say yo vivo, tú vives, la usted vive, nosotros vivimos, vosotros vivís, and ellos, ellas, ustedes viven. So one last thing to think about before we go is that in Spanish, when you're speaking to a native speaker, and if you are using the form of a verb that's conjugated, and it only has one option as to what the subject can be, you can actually omit the subject, which we cannot do in English. So for example, in English, you could say we run. And in Spanish, you could say nosotros corremos, or if you just said corremos, any Spanish speaker would know that you're talking about nosotros, we, because there are no other subjects that have the verb ending amos. You have to be careful with this though, because sometimes A different ending can have multiple subjects. For example, you can never really use this in he, she, or it unless you've explicitly stated earlier in an earlier sentences what subject you're talking about. But it's kind of something to help you think about. It's how a native speaker would speak. Is they wouldn't always use the subject. Sometimes the subject is implied. So I may have just blown your minds a little bit here. I want you all to know that we're going to work on this a lot in class, so don't worry about it. Don't panic. If you have questions, we're going to go over this all. As always, you can rewatch this video. I recommend that you go ahead and copy down the verb charts. You can pick any verb for each of the choices, the AR, the ER, the IR verbs, and just practice writing them out, conjugated for each of the 6 subjects we've listed there. And get used to thinking about how our verb needs to always depend on our subject. And I will see you all in class where we're going to practice this some more.